The cocktail party, the Iron Bowl, the Egg Bowl.
But only one ever called itself a shootout.
371 miles and one famous river separate the campuses of OU and UT, but it might as well be a million.
They tell us everything's bigger there, but that doesn't mean better.
Jones is turned.
We find out who's better over 4 quarters, one time every fall.
You can call it the shootout, the rivalry, the showdown, the rumble.
But no matter what you call it, it's 123 years of unforgettable moments.
We're not going to let them grow another horn.
So settle in for KOCO's Red River Rewind. All right, countdown is here to OU, Texas. Welcome inside the Cotton Bowl. I am Brian Keating. He is Elgin Rucker. This is the Red River Rewind. We're just a couple of days out from one of the great rivalries in all of sports, OU, Texas.
One of the greatest rivalries and longest running rivalries. Over 100 years of history. Most of those games played inside this stadium, so it's a great place to be.
Since 1932, they've played in the Cotton Bowl. And so all the great teams, we'll go back and look at a bunch of those. A bunch of great players. We talked to a bunch of great players. And then Barry Switzer. Nobody knows OU, Texas more than Coach Switzer. A lot of great Switzer stuff coming up in the show.
And a lot of great players who've played in this game. 9 Heisman winners, 7 from Oklahoma. Jason White is one of them. In that 2003 meeting, one of the best Oklahoma has ever produced against Texas.
White buys time, goes in zone, got a receiver. Touchdown!
20 years since we've seen Oklahoma beat Texas that bad. Of course, they want to try to do that again. Jason White can tell you how to do it because of what he did in that game, for sure.
It was 65-13, the largest margin of victory in the history of the series. Here's my conversation with the 2003 Heisman Trophy winner, Jason White.
You know, that was one of those games where you're just in the zone and everything just seems like it's in slow motion. Like you prepared well for the game. Your team prepared well. You guys, in fact, that was a game that there was a little squabble before the game. So it only made it worse for us. Like we were ready to play. But I just remember everything was in slow motion that game, and you know, anybody that's played sports, when you kind of get in that zone and things slow down for you, it just makes it so much easier. And the entire game, like that's the way it was for me. And a lot of the other guys felt the same way. I remember talking to Mark Clayton about it. He was like, it just seems like everything's like slow, and I'm watching the ball go all the way into my hands, and there's nobody in front of me, and I'm running free. So, you know, it was just one of those games that we were firing on all cylinders that game. We played really well.
The legendary Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas.
The atmosphere of the game. You know, I don't think there's any other games that are played inside a state fair. The smells, I mean, it's just, and as a player, especially if you're nervous, like those smells really get to you because it's all fried food, grease, you know. And so if you're already kind of nervous and nauseated, that only adds to it. But
what did you smell? That's the first time I've talked to a lot of people about the OU Texas game. No one's ever said they could smell from the stadium.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you're in the stadium, you can smell like just like that fair food. You know, the corn dog, the grease. You can smell the funnel cakes. I remember smelling the funnel cakes. But, you know, it was just one of those things that it seemed like it made me more nauseous because of the smells. And I was already nervous anyway, so.
The #1 team in the nation, unbeaten. And now they're coming onto the field at the Cotton Bowl.
The atmosphere of that game and walking down the tunnel and walking out to a perfectly split stadium is one of the best experiences I ever had. And, you know, not to mention that Oklahoma and Texas, they touch, you know. And so Oklahoma's always recruiting Texas and Texas is recruiting Oklahoma. So that just makes it that much more of a game because, you know, although you come from Texas, like you went to Oklahoma to be a Sooner, and now you want to go back into Texas to beat Texas, who probably recruited you at the same time. So, you know, I think that's probably the biggest, you know, draw for that game is, you know, the atmosphere and then, you know, the bragging rights a lot, you know, especially for the recruiting.
Everybody talks about the tunnel. Just take me through kind of everything that goes into leaving the locker room and walking out onto the field.
So in my experience, you one of the coolest parts of that game was walking down the tunnel for the very first time, at the start of the game. Because used to, I don't think they do it anymore because there's been some squams. So, but literally there would be a yellow tape line, and then there would be security guards lined up right, and OU's on one side and Texas is on the other. And you're literally walking out to play the game, so you can imagine the jollying going back and forth. And so just walking down that tunnel, listening to all the jawing going back. And eventually, I think in 2003, there was a little squabble before the game, and it was just because of all the talking in the tunnel. The security guards can only hold back so much. So, but that was one of the funnest parts of that game, is just being able to, you're standing side by side to the team you're about to play, and you're walking down the tunnel at the same time.
White pitches it quickly to Clayton as we start the fourth quarter. Clayton's free, goes for the end zone, touchdown, Oklahoma.
What's the hat like putting it on?
The hat is small. It's actually, I don't know who can actually wear it and wear it right, but it's a small hat, and it's hard as a rock. Obviously it's hard.
Yeah.
But I think just passing it around the locker room and watching all the guys try it on, it kind of became a tradition.
All right, so here at the Cotton Bowl, this is the Texas Longhorns side. Bevo's going to hang out right over here somewhere. Look, we talked about this being one of the great rivalries, not just in college football, but all of college sports. But here's the thing. They can't quite decide what they want to call it.
Well, they keep switching. They started as rivalry, then it went to shootout, then showdown, and now we're back to rivalry, which I think is fitting since this will be the last time they play this game as members of the Big 12. So kind of going back to some of their roots with this.
Speaking of going back, and it wasn't the Big 12 then, but Bud Wilkinson used to beat up on the Texas Longhorns. So let's do that. Let's go to Bud's era, before 1970, the OU-Texas rivalry. November 16th, 1907, the moment U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt put quill pen to paper, officially declaring Oklahoma the 46th state. But the Sooners-Longhorns rivalry had already been played 9 times. The football team was already a part of the fabric of the state.
Oklahoma, birthplace of the Flying Farmers of America, the national home of the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and an up-and-coming younger generation, some blessed with both brains and beauty. Blessed also with the nation's leading Big Red football team.
That Big Red football team would go through a handful of head coaches, from Benny Owen to Dewey Luster, and a lot of losses to Texas. In the first 41 games against the Horns, OU won only 11 of them. But then, the perfect fit walked into Norman, Oklahoma. Former players called him a genius. Historians say he started tradition at Oklahoma. And you know him as Bud Wilkinson.
Inside Football with Bud Wilkinson, head coach of the University of Oklahoma's football team. 15 minutes of fast-moving, exciting highlights of football. The people, its plays, and its problems. Brought to you by your National Guard, a strong force of citizen soldiers and airmen.
From 1947 until 1963, the Sooners' leading man led the Crimson and Cream to win after win, including 47 in a row in the early 1950s, a college football record that still stands today, along with 3 national titles. Going into 1958, OU had won 6 in a row against the Longhorns, with Wilkinson at the helm.
Does it as well as it possibly can be done, with excellent blocking downfield on the punt return.
1958 would start the domino effect for Texas to stay in the win column until Wilkinson's resignation 6 years later. Wilkinson traded in Saturdays on the sideline for a race for a U.S. Senate seat and a job in the Kennedy administration. And OU traded in wins for almost a decade, beating Texas only 1 time in the 1960s. One of the things I think is really cool about this OU-Texas rivalry is that some of the main players in this series actually have a history at the other school, and obviously nobody more famous than that than Darrell Royal, the legendary head coach of the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, no one did it like him. He had an All-American season at Oklahoma, an undefeated season as well as a member of the Sooners football team, and then as a coach for the Longhorns. 12 wins against the Sooners. No other coach in the history of this rivalry has as many wins as that guy.
He's from Hollis, Oklahoma. He is also a legend in Austin, Texas. We went to Hollis. Our own Elise Jones has that story.
A little town tucked in the southwest corner of Oklahoma, home to one of the biggest names in football history, Darrell Royal.
sign out there on the field as we go on the field. It's just something that traditionally when we go by, we give it a little tap.
If the local football team touches your name before every game 80 years after you graduate, you must have left a legacy.
He's a legacy. He'll never be forgotten in Hollis.
Darrell Royal was born and raised in Hollis, Oklahoma, and is still today remembered as a stellar athlete.
You can talk about Billy Sims. You can talk about all those great players. Darrell played both sides of the ball.
Kind of like catching magic in a bottle right there.
I was in junior high school, and Darrell was the big, great athlete in our county, in Harmon County. And he not only was the best football player at Hollis, but he was the best basketball player in the county and the best baseball player.
Ted Owens, later a coaching legend in his own right, coached basketball at Kansas for 2 decades and calls Darrell Royal his lifelong friend.
I'm very happy just to be people to mention me in the same breath that Darrell, because his career was just outstanding.
The punter, the playmaker, the perfect picture of an OU All-American.
Darrell had a great love for the University of Oklahoma and had a great love for his hometown of Hollis.
He started 9 games for OU at quarterback and never lost.
Royal set records and made his hometown proud, beating the Longhorns 2 out of 4 seasons in college.
There used to be a sign outside of Hollis, "Welcome to Hollis, home of Darrell Royal."
Despite his deep Oklahoma roots, he didn't always bleed crimson and cream.
We loved him until he went to Texas.
Coach Darrell Royal and Ernie Coy in the nation's spotlight and the eyes of Texas. The nation salutes the mighty Texas Longhorns and their magnificent coach Darrell Royal.
A decision that shocked Sooner fans and his hometown. This Oklahoman headline saying it all. Hollis upset with Darrell.
Yeah, it was a bitter rivalry. It still is.
How do you feel? I've got to be the happiest guy in America tonight.
One of the most decorated college football coaches in history.
And here's a big one for the Longhorns.
With 3 national championships and 0 losing seasons, Royal created a dynasty in Austin.
You deserve to be number 1, and that's what you are.
Texas was thrilled to have him.
And Texas was hungry to beat Oklahoma. Royal did just that, 12 out of 20 times as coach. Owens says the first time Royal defeated his alma mater.
When he went down to shake hands with Bud, he cried. He was that emotional about it because Bud Wilkinson was his hero.
That's when Texas knew they had their guy. After his first season, the Texas House of Representatives named Royal an honorary Texan, and even the OU fans were tuning in.
The only time I rooted against Darrell was when they played OU.
I can remember some games when I was a little bitty guy and we'd watch Texas. And I probably didn't understand why we were watching Texas play, but my dad knew the coach.
When Royal stepped down from head coach, Owens says his career was far from over and his legacy at UT just beginning.
I've always said that I wanted to leave before people wanted me to leave.
And the Board of Regents, they came over and said, "Darrell, we have a question we need to ask you. Could we have your permission to name the stadium the Darrell K. Walls Stadium?" And of course, they were floored.
But back in Hollis, they wouldn't forget Royal either, also naming their field after their homegrown legend.
I think he was proud of his roots, proud of what he accomplished at OU, wasn't ashamed of what he did at Texas, whether you liked it or not.
A reminder that no dream is too small.
It's just an encouragement for young people that you're going to run into a lot of difficulties in life and certainly in sports. And everything's not going to be easy. That's what Darrell was. He was an example of what you can do if you work hard, if you sacrifice, if you believe and have strong faith that you can be successful.
Royal passed away in 2012, and while he may have died a Longhorn,
His legacy is with Sooner fans.
I think the Sooner fans can be very proud that Darrell Royal was a part of Sooner Nation.
Oklahoma will always be the home of Darrell Royal.
Darrell's association and success with Coach Wilkinson and the success he'd had against Texas as a player opened doors for him. He probably wouldn't have gotten the Texas job were not for what had happened to him at Oklahoma, and he was always grateful for that. Always grateful for what happened to him at a little town, Hollis, Oklahoma.
In Hollis, Elise Jones, KOCO 5 News.
And so this is what everybody talks about. You know, that famous 50-50 split right here down the 50-yard line. And so I'm on the OU side. Everything this way is crimson and cream. And I had to put you on the Texas side. You got to hang out Bevo over there with the Texas fans.
That's okay. I don't mind it. I do really love the visual that it gives. The 50-50 split, it's become synonymous with the Cotton Bowl, but there have been talks in the past about moving it to campus sites or even Jerry's World in Arlington. But our very own Kobe Terrell set out to find exactly why this game keeps getting played right here on this field.
Texas and Oklahoma.
Both states take a tremendous amount of pride in winning that game.
College football fans know from the beginning there was OU and there was Texas. And right in the middle, the Cotton Bowl. Many say you can't have the two teams play without the Cotton Bowl. I talked to a historian about what the venue means for Sooners and Longhorns.
66-33 in Norman.
1912 was the first time they played in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas.
At the core of the sport, the tradition, the pageantry, everything that goes into that in a college game day atmosphere, it all kind of culminates at the Cotton Bowl.
To the right side on the move, touchdown OU.
But still, the rumors the game could change venues are as old as time.
There's nothing like the Cotton Bowl.
In 2009, KOCO 5 asked fans what they thought about moving the game to play at the Cowboys Stadium. Still a middle ground for the two teams.
We like it right here. The atmosphere of the State Fair is what we come for.
Every year?
Every year.
So would you still come, obviously?
Obviously, but this is what makes it different, makes it special.
Here's what we know. The current contract runs through 2025, but we also know things are changing, with both teams headed for the SEC. Commissioner Greg Sankey told KOCO this summer the league wouldn't meddle with the location.
Those two schools decide that's a tradition that they want to honor, and we honor that with them.
And as long as the two teams remain permanent opponents, observers think it's likely nothing changes.
Handshake agreement, or whatever you want to call it, between Oklahoma and Texas right now.
When the game's contract was extended in 2014, OU's athletic director said the University of Oklahoma is thrilled about preserving the rich tradition of this game in the city of Dallas. One historian told me that rich tradition had a huge benefit to OU over the years.
Prior to World War II, Texas had a large lead in winning percentage over OU. After World War II, state leaders and OU leaders decided they wanted to push back against this Grapes of Wrath image of Oklahoma, and they put a lot of money in the program. They tried to attract World War II veterans, and since World War II, OU's been a powerhouse, and it's been over 500 in the OU-Texas game.
He says the Cotton Bowl meant national recognition for the changes OU was trying to make.
There weren't a lot of games on television until, late 20th century. But that game was always on television, that and OU Nebraska. So that helped get eyes on the University of Oklahoma.
Do you think that it would be that way if it weren't for the Cotton Bowl?
No.
Fans new and old wanted to stay here, and even team reporters can't imagine the game without the venue.
Home and aways, people throw that kind of stuff out there.
No, never. I mean, I think that's like one of the truly special portions of OU Texas in preserving the rivalries, playing at the Cotton Bowl.
If it leaves the Texas State Fair, then I think it becomes just another rivalry game.
It's a generation thing, my grandparents or, parents before them. It should stay in Dallas. There's no way it should move.
Fans got a taste of that game outside the fair back in 2018 when the two met in the Big 12 Championship.
It just wasn't the same.
And no matter how bad or good the teams are, you watch. And fans will always feel the same way about their rival.
That hatred for, the burnt orange and then the burnt orange that hates the crimson and cream, that will definitely be full throttle.
Touchdown OU!
Colby Terrell, KOCO 5 News.
As we continue our walk through the history of the OU-Texas rivalry, we get to the 1970s. It's a decade known for disco, Richard Nixon's resignation, and Oklahoma beating Texas.
Someone asked me last night, says, Coach, you know what that means? I said, well, through the years, I've heard it called different things. And he said, well, Coach, what that represents is the only 2 games they've won this decade. Saturday, we're not going to let them go another horn.
Every game in the 70s featured at least one top 10 team. 6 times, both teams were in the top 10. The Sooners won 6 of those 10 games. The Longhorns won 3. And then there was the 1976 tie.
Oklahoma's #1, and we're going to beat the hell out of Texas.
The entire scene surrounding the rivalry was at a fever pitch, according to Oklahoma broadcasting legend Jack Ogle.
This is where it'll all happen Friday night here on Commerce Street in Dallas, Texas. The people will mill up and down the streets in unbelievable numbers. Cars will parade up and down this street, bumper to bumper, and filling the street from side to side, winding along like a wounded snake.
And tickets, man, those were a hot commodity. So KOCO reporter Gan Matthews set out to find a way inside.
One good way to locate an OU Texas ticket is to go through the classified advertisements of the newspaper. But you may be sure you'll end up paying more than the list price of $12, even if scalping is illegal. Or you can offer something besides money. In 1975, one man wanted an OU Texas ticket so badly that he offered his entire collection of Willie Nelson records and a date with his wife in exchange for one. That may have been the most bizarre ad for an OU Texas ticket of all time. But those in 1979 aren't bad either. This is the best of the lot, placed by a man in Davis, Oklahoma. And for 2 sets of dentures, he's not going to settle for any end zone tickets. You can bet on that. And if you need a place to stay in Big D, here's just the thing. Only $350. Car optional, tickets definitely not included.
Stay with us on the Red River Rewind. Coming up next, we're talking to the king, Barry Switzer, one of the all-time legends of the OU-Texas rivalry. And you know what? Switzer beat Texas 9 times.
Put in the greatest defensive performance that's ever been on.
He started with the same high level of success the 70s ended with for the Sooners.
And we've got some big games coming up. But to beat Texas is always a great thrill, but to be ranked #1 in the country.
But the Longhorns got the better of the Sooners in 80, 81, and 83. Then came 1984. Don't ask an OU fan about 1984.
Oklahoma was leading 15-12 with only seconds left in the rain. Texas threw into the end zone. You make the call.
It is incomplete. Oh, boy. We have a chance at home to see Bryant. He's just going to fade over towards the boundary and throw it up. Johnson goes up. Woo. Danbury did catch the ball, but now they're trying to decide whether he was in bounds or not.
Apparently he was out of bounds.
Didn't have control with 1 foot in bounds while he had control.
As you well know, the Horns retained possession, kicked a field goal as time ran out, and the game ended in a 15-all tie.
Oklahoma would reel off wins in the next 4, fueled in part by the Boz.
Yep, well, there it is. It's the Boz, number 44, Brian Bosworth. Now, he's the draw in this otherwise predictable OU-Texas meeting. In Dallas, we even found a center of Boz worship.
Well, I've given 1 Boz haircut so far. I gave it Monday this week. But between now and Saturday night, I hope to be giving several more Boz haircuts.
You're going to get a Boz haircut, sir?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, so it's not for everyone.
The decade would end with Barry Switzer's resignation and a loss to the Longhorns in Gary Gibbs' debut season. Elgin, you know who knows a thing or two about being dominant in this series? Yeah, it's Bob Stoops. He beat Texas 11 times.
Yeah, and of course, the king, Barry Switzer, has his fair share of wins as well, and that means a lot of golden hats going back to Norman.
Yeah, and his other hat, the beat Texas hat that he busted out in 1984.
The greatest defensive performance that's ever been on.
So let's look back at some of the interviews we've done over the years with the king, Barry Switzer.
Everyone knows the importance of this game. It's 2 teams that have a great tradition in college football, and they have tremendous pride in what they are and who they are.
I think to our fan base, Texas is more important than Nebraska when we were in the Big 8 Conference, which is always the championship in the Orange Bowl.
In 1973, it was my first year, we won the 52-13. We hung half 100 on them, so anytime you do that, that's always good. You beat Texas by 50. We got so many people that have graduated and gone south of the Red River that live in Houston, Dallas, West Texas, and all, make a living, that they got to live there for $365 a year, and us beating their ass in the Cotton Bowl always helps them live a little better.
To beat Texas is always a great thrill, but to be ranked number one in the country, you're undefeated, they're undefeated, a lot at stake, and I think this victory establishes the fact that Oklahoma, and I do think that we're the number one football team in the country. Well, it is special because it's the largest fair in the world. There'll be 500,000 people out on the fairground. There'll be 100,000 inside. 500,000 outside won't give a damn about what's going on the inside.
This game has always been, in many cases, the deciding factor who might be the national champion.
Let's rewind again for a trip to the 1990s. It's a decade that started with enthusiasm.
From 47 yards to win it for Oklahoma. Lasher's kick is no good.
But most Sooner fans would probably rather forget much of that decade.
Exactly right. In the 90s, Oklahoma has lost 5 of 6 games, but all 5 of those losses have been by 10 points or less.
One of those was this close. You probably remember the 1994 game. OU needing a touchdown on 4th and goal, down 7. The Longhorns make the stop and win the game. OU managed just 2 wins and a tie in the entire decade, while a parade of coaches passed through Norman.
We may not be as talented and as experienced as they are, but I'm convinced we've got some real sluggers out there that will fight to the very end, and if we can get this thing into that kind of a football game, I think we've got a real shot at it.
But hope walked through the door ahead of the 1999 contest.
Well, they've got big play guys.
Bob Stoops fell short in his first battle with the Longhorns, but dominance was around the corner. And when we come back, we'll take a look at one of the most important decades of this program, including
championship number 7
in the year 2000 and a record-breaking performance from running back Quentin Griffin. We'll relive that epic moment in the Red River Rewind.
Red River Rewind. I'm Brian Keating alongside Elgin Rucker. And you know, Elgin, this is the famous walk, down the tunnel into the Cotton Bowl. You got all the OU fans, and you talk about the 50-50 split and the Texas fans all the way over there. And as a player, it's hard for me to imagine coming out, but I know this is when it's time for OU Texas.
Yeah, and the trash talk right here, it's next level. Cover your kids' ears because anything can fly out of somebody's mouth, so you have to have your focus at a near perfection type level. I mean, Quentin Griffin coming out here rushing for 6 touchdowns, tying the NCAA record. His focus had to be unparalleled to have a game like that.
Yeah, and then OU went on to win the national championship in 2000, and they played for 3 more in the decade. So let's go back in time. Rewind. From the moment the 2000 season started, things just felt different in Norman. And that includes October 7th, the day the Sooners went down to Dallas to take on the 11th-ranked Longhorns.
It may have been a cold, dreary day in Dallas, but the OU offense couldn't have been brighter in the Cotton Bowl. After stuffing Texas on the game's first series, the Sooner offense begins its most productive first half of the season. While the OU offense was running, passing, and scoring at will, the OU defense was pitching a shutout. But soon they, too, would pitch in with some points. Chris Sims on a relief of Major Applewhite, and he's picked off by Rocky Calmus, who takes the theft 41 yards for a touchdown and a 35-0 Oklahoma advantage.
That 63-14 rout stands as one of the major memorable moments for OU fans in their national championship season. And things didn't slow down the next few years. The Sooners will never forget Superman Roy Williams flying through the air in a 14-3 win in 2001. And in 2003, it was blowout time again, this time 65-13. The games remained huge throughout the decade.
This game will always be big, and how you make it bigger, I don't know. The bottom line is you need to win it.
And the fans, as rabid as ever.
They shake the bus is going left or right, Some of the Texas fans, throwing hot dogs at the bus, and it's just, just packed on both sides. People chanting Boomer Sooner. It was just, things that you'll never forget.
Texas would surge in the second half of the decade, winning 4 of 5, including the 2008 game that knocked OU out of the top spot in the AP poll. So my first taste of the Cotton Bowl in OU, Texas was way back in 1989. And look, it was a tough day for Oklahoma that day. They lost 28-14. But that one day does not compare to what Al Eschbach has done. And look, you know Al Eschbach, right? The legend of sports radio in Oklahoma City, right? I think Al Eschbach's covered more OU Texas games than anybody ever.
Okay, let's go to Dan. You're up, Dan.
Our own Dakota Wapakichi is with Al Eschbach.
How many years have you been kind of reporting on Oklahoma?
Well, I've been doing sports talk radio 47 straight years.
I am, trust me, I know. I'm very, very fortunate.
47 years, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. Who does anything 47 years?
And during that, how many times have you reported on OU Texas and that historic rivalry?
I've been done doing it, reporting on it since 1973, every game since 1973.
Okay, thank you very much.
You came from New Jersey to Oklahoma, and you being able to see that 50-50 split for the first time, what was your kind of reaction to it all?
It's not a regular football game, because when you get to that fairgrounds and people are just, you see the red, the orange, and people yelling at each other, and there's the buses come into the fairgrounds, and then we're doing like a pre or post game show, and they see we're from Oklahoma. Texas fans start screaming at us, shouting obscenities and everything, and so it's the most unique college football game that there is. It's totally, I think, maybe Army, Navy, OU, Texas, and it's so unique because it's in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, and it just, the state fair's going on. When I first time I went, I go, what's that big thing standing there? They go, that's Big Tex. I go, okay, good. It's an event. When I went to the Masters, I go, this is more than a sporting event. This is something so different, so special. And that's what OU Texas is.
They went from Darrell Royal to Mac Brown to win a championship. That was it.
Going into the SEC next year, this is something that's going to continue for a while, too. I mean, it's going to go forever, right?
It'll be, I'm sure, the same early October. You don't change. There's people, let's get this out of the Cotton Bowl and over to Jury Rule. No, it's not the same without the state fair. People in Oklahoma hate the people in Texas. People in Texas hate people in Oklahoma. Probably goes back to the Dust Bowl. I've been around that long. So there's just the two states don't like each other. When Nebraska was really good, and in the Big 8, then the Big 12, OU-Nebraska was a great rivalry. It was a rivalry out of respect. OU Texas is a rivalry out of hatred. This is one of these rivals, Alabama-Auburn, hatred. Ohio State-Michigan, hatred. This is a rivalry based on hate.
Appreciate it. Take care. See ya.
Stay with us on the Red River Rewind. Coming up next, a conversation with former All-American Gabe Ikard.
That's like my number one memory, is being like, the hat has made me bleed.
And you know it's not time for OU Texas until the Roughnecks plant the grass at the Cotton Bowl. Oh, yeah.
It would remain dominant against the Longhorns going into the 2010s, starting the decade with back-to-back wins in Dallas.
It's time for our picks. Brian, go first.
KOCO's sports director, Brian Keating, getting his first experience at the Cotton Bowl in 2012.
Well, it's so cool to watch the environment here. It is like a bowl game, and I know we say that every single season, but to see people from everywhere dressed in different colors and there's no home field advantage, it is so cool to be here, and you just feel the buzz coming through the state fair as we get to the Cotton Bowl.
4 years later, Baker Mayfield left his mark on this legendary matchup. The Texas-born quarterback would put up record-breaking numbers, 390 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and all 3 went to D.D. Westbrook, who also racked up 232 yards receiving. Both Mayfield's passing yards and Westbrook's receiving yards are the most in the history of OU Texas. Following that epic 2016 season, Oklahoma fans were stunned to have to say goodbye to the head coach with nearly 200 wins for the Crimson and Cream, Bob Stoops.
Shockwaves from Memorial Stadium and beyond. A bombshell announcement in the world of Oklahoma sports. OU head coach Bob Stoops retiring. The official word coming in just a few hours ago. This is still late breaking.
Stepping down after 18 years as the head football coach here at Oklahoma. And feel like I've been absolutely the luckiest, most fortunate guy in the world.
The man chosen to fill that coveted role, his offensive coordinator, Lincoln Riley. Riley would lead the Sooners to a 12-2 record and a 29-24 win over Texas in his first season as head coach in 2017. Going into the 2018 season, the Golden Hat had spent 260 weeks in Norman over a 5-year span. Quarterback Kyler Murray on a mission to make sure that didn't change. But in the end, it would not be enough. The final score, 48-45. A heartbreaking loss, but redemption was on the horizon. Just 7 weeks later, the two teams would meet once again, this time at Jerry's World in Arlington for the Big 12 championship. But this was Kyler Murray's Heisman moment. Murray and CeeDee Lamb connected for a second quarter 28-yard touchdown, which sparked Oklahoma's comeback win and punched their ticket to the college football playoff.
All right, I mean, as you can see around it, I mean, preparation's still underway here at the Cotton Bowl. It takes a lot of work to get ready for OU Texas.
It does.
But the work isn't done until the Roughnecks plant the grass here at the Cotton Bowl.
Gotta plant the grass. And you know they say the grass isn't greener on the other side, but Sooner fans would disagree. They think they have the better team and probably the better blades of grass, too.
Our own Audrey Goodson is with the grass people, the Roughnecks.
You may have seen them on the sideline at OU football games or driving the Sooner schooner, but there are many traditions that the organization has that you might not have heard of, especially when it comes to OU Texas weekend. Every Sooner fan knows that driving the Sooner schooner is an important job. But the night before OU Texas, schooner driver and Roughneck president Connor Amy has what could be an even more important role.
We protect the ponies the night before, make sure no Texas fans, no Texas football players, or anybody who's trying to mess with them, paint them orange or something. That would be terrible.
But that's not the only tradition he and the Roughnecks have for the weekend. And although the game is played at the Cotton Bowl, the organization always makes sure that the Sooners have a home field advantage.
So we will go into the stadium and at the end of the last game before OU Texas, we'll take some of the grass out of the field and we'll put it in one of our shotgun shells and bring it down to the Cotton Bowl, and we'll just take it inside of our uniform, and we'll take the grass out and we'll sprinkle it on the 50.
They say this tradition gives the Sooners good luck and brings a piece of Owen Field to Dallas. And the Roughnecks say their famous paddles also bring the team favor. Tell me what these paddles were for.
So the only thing the paddles are used for at this point is something we call fabata. It's a long-standing tradition. We start on the 50-yard line on our field, and we run to the north end zone and slide in, and we have some words that we say, and we beat our paddles on the ground. That is to rid the field of any bad spirits that would help us to make us lose.
Many of these OU Texas traditions have dated back since the Roughnecks became an official organization in 1915. They brought on the Lil Sis program in 1973.
When you say Roughneck, it's not just a name. We really take something to that. We wear the patch on our back with pride.
But the traditions are even more visible back in Norman. The Roughnecks call it Paint Texas, a tradition since 1983.
We all come down right here and we paint a little phrase on the ground, kind of to hype up the university and get everyone ready for that OU Texas game day atmosphere.
The Sunday night leading up to the game, you'll see the Roughnecks and Lil Sis, as well as their alumni, painting Beat the Hell Out of Texas on the sidewalk near Asp Avenue and Elm. But there's one last tradition that's personal for their leader. Texas has a rival organization called the Silver Spurs, and the presidents of both clubs have something of their own on the line that depends on the final score of the game.
We have made a deal that has been long going for years that the winning president shaves the losing president's head. So I've got a little more on the line this year. I'm a little more nervous about it, but I have confidence in our team.
And they say that these traditions will continue for years to come. In Norman, Audrey Goodson, KOCO 5 News.
So, man, we're talking about the turf. We know for a fact this turf has been completely tore up by some of the great plays we've seen on this field. But what's your favorite?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so many in the history of this series. I'm just going to go back a couple of years. I don't know if it's my favorite play, but it's essentially winning on the last play of the game. It's Kennedy Brooks out of the Wildcat, takes the ball, runs. OU beats Texas in 2021.
Last play of the game, 1 second left, 33 yards, and it caps off the biggest comeback in the history of this series. So, of course, one of the best plays we've seen in OU Texas.
Yeah, and part of that call, part of the OU radio network, was Gabe Ikard, 4-year starter at Oklahoma, former All-American at Oklahoma.
Right.
We talked to him about what it means to be a part of OU Texas.
There is just nothing like the chaotic energy of the Cotton Bowl on that Saturday in October, and it's special. Everyone talks about the 50-50 split, and that's great, but just the entire scene, everything about it. I mean, they put a football stadium in the middle of the state fair. I mean, it's the most college football thing you can imagine, and that's what makes it great.
Do you remember putting on the hat?
Yes. And first of all, it is not metal. People think it's metal. It's definitely not. And there's actually a pretty embarrassing picture of me. I think it's 2011 and 2012. We just absolutely whooped them. I mean, it was just, we just absolutely took it to them. And there's a picture of me putting it on, and I have this very, like, almost pained look on my face. And it's because the inside of the hat, the paint was chipping. The hat stabbed me in the forehead. It, like, literally cut me. Really? It literally cut me. And I was just like, wait, this is not how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be smiling. Right. And I've got my pictures smiling with it on. But yeah, that's like my number one memory, is being like, the hat has made me bleed. So yeah, there's a little bit of my blood on that thing.
You are looking live at one of the great scenes in all of college football.
Well, the first time I remember walking down, that's redshirt freshman starting in that game for the first time, and I started in 4 of them. Right. You get more comfortable each year, but the first time I was just trying not to, like, throw up on myself. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. Right, growing up as an OU fan, you know what that game means. But you try to look as confident as possible. Yeah. And as I, went deeper into my career, started talking a little more, letting the Longhorns know how I felt. And I was not a trash talking guy, but for whatever reason, that game, the switch, it got flipped for sure. But it's just a special feeling. Like, even you still think about it, you get chills. It is such a scene. And, you think about the history of the game, what it means, especially as an Oklahoma kid, what that game means to essentially everyone I know. And you feel that weight, but the good thing about it is once the ball gets kicked off, it's football, right? It's you versus the man across from you in between white lines, and you kind of forget about all the other stuff. But it's special.
Oklahoma won its first national championship of the 2000s in the year 2000, and it was on ever since. High expectations for the Sooners in all of the years to follow, but we'll get to relive those first few years after that 2000 national title through the eyes of former Sooner quarterback Paul Thompson, who joins us next.